Well, I want to introduce to you Dr. David Campt. He's going to give a background slide, so I won't do all that. But all I have to tell you is that he's worked at the White House. He's worked at various things. And Dr. Stevens speaks highly of him. And he is talking to us today about citizen engagement. He has a unique way of gauging that, as well as giving us advice and counsel on it. So without further ado, Dr. David.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Now, y'all are from the South, right?
That's right.
Let's try it again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, but my parents grew up here in North Carolina. So I know people in the South have energy, and I'm really happy to be here today. I've never been to Asheville before, and I'm happy to talk to you folks because you people really care about civic engagement. That's part of your mission, part of your job, and what I obsess about is that question. How do we have better conversations? How do we hear from more people and make sure they're having the right conversation that's going to help them move forward? So what I want to do over the next 55 minutes is to expose you to an approach to that I found very effective, and not just expose you to it, but actually have you experience it. So, my learning objectives. I want to discuss a little bit how different types of meetings mind the group brain differently. I want to present some polling questions as a basic way of minding the group's brain. I want to explain different types of polling questions and different types of meetings. Give you a tangible experience of the benefits of polling, and maybe have a little fun. I'm going to say a little bit about my background. I'm old enough I'm a child of the 70s, for the most part. And the big deal in Detroit, where I grew up, was whose government is it? As you may remember, with all the riots in '68, well, Detroit was early. We had ours in '67. So, there was a big tumult over the question of whose government is it? Is it black folks' government? Is it white folks' government? So all through my elementary school years, this question was swirling about. I had a fourth grade teacher named Mr. Fine, and he would say, you know, people are more alike than they are different. He would always say that. And I think he was trying to manage the conflict that might emerge in our class that might have been affected by what was happening among our parents. So that became a question for me. To what extent are people different? And to what extent do the differences matter for the kind of government that they have and the government they want? As an undergrad, excuse me, it was very clear to me that people were having very different experiences. I went to Princeton University, and I faced, as well as the black people there, faced a fair amount of skepticism from our white comrades about whether we should be there or not. What were your SAT scores? How'd you do in high school? Questions that you should not happen at a party, right? But what I really noted is that some of my black fellow students, this really affected them. Like, it was irritating. It was sometimes enraging. For some of them, it was tear-making. They thought about transferring. And I had to wrestle with the fact that not only am I having a different experience than my white comrades, I'm also having a different experience from some of my black comrades too. What's that about? And so the question that further deepened my interest in the question of how do we make sense of the different experiences that people have. After I finished, I worked as a magazine editor, and then I went to graduate school. Do not ask me how long it took me to finish my PhD. It took a while, and the question that I wanted to pursue as for my dissertation in city planning was, how do you meet people where they are? I studied cultural competence, and it had to do with the degree to which agencies that deliver services adapt their delivery to who they're serving. Then I worked for the White House. I finished my dissertation, worked for the White House, and worked for the President Clinton's race initiative. And it was trying to foster dialogue, among other things. And so I had to think about what are the key elements of a transformative dialogue? What are the key elements of an exchange between people or between groups that will help them move forward collectively. But I also learned that there's a tension between talk to, hear from. One of the things that President Clinton's advisors, who, by the way, did not like the race initiative, President Clinton got it through over his own advisors. What they wanted to do was to promote the president as a leader on race relations. They wanted to get his position out there. But they also wanted this thing had a dialogue focus. So that also means that they needed to create settings of dialogue. Those are different things. Is your leader trying to promote a position, or is your leader trying to be a convener of exchange, some of which he might disagree with, or she might disagree with? And that tension is one of the things that made the race initiative not work so well. I don't think we solved the race problem back in '97. So part of what we can talk about today is that tension between talk to and hear from. I have the sense from talking to folks at the bar last night that that's something that you guys confront a lot. I always just like to show a picture of me and the president. All right. My basic position is that all of us are smarter than any of us. So part of why I call it the group brain is because I believe that if we put our heads together in a good way, we can often come up with better solutions to problems than any of the smartest people around. Okay, we're going to use these devices. These clicker devices, everybody should have one. They're often called audience response devices. They're called clickers, keypads, etc. The most common term is audience response devices, or ARS. I think if you say it, it sounds like a body part, and I don't think that's good. So I'm going to show you my fancy slide, my fancy transition, and I want y'all to respond like you like it. Okay, that was okay. Thank you for that. I think a better name is speed polling to enhance input and knowledge, or SPEIK. Right? So one of the things I'm trying to do is to rebrand these things. They can be phones, they can be these devices, but I think we need to call them what they do. And I will refer to these as keypads or SPEIK devices. That's one of my goals. Core capabilities. You ask a multiple choice question, which we will do, and you instantly see the answer. Sometimes you can answer open-ended questions depending on the technology. They're anonymous. Anonymous use is developed most of the time. And you get a pictogram of the summary of responses, a bar chart or pie chart, or a word cloud. That's the core capability. Ask a question, hear from the people, they enter it in, you see the collective answer. They're easy to use. I'll put up a question, you just put up the number or letter corresponding to your choice. Don't press go or anything else. Leave them here at the end. They don't work on your DVR at home. They won't open your garage door. If you make a mistake, just enter again. Basically, it's kind of like this. You can vote as often as you like, but we're not in Chicago, so only the last vote counts. All right. What did you do last night? You went to the biggest of the numerous Biltmores around. It seems like everything is named Biltmore. Number 2, craft brews or spirits, but only for the taste, of course. You enjoyed Asheville's fine cuisine, as we find. You checked out the music scene. Quiet night here at the hotel, or you're approaching it like Vegas, baby. What happened last night stays last night. Yep. What'd you do last night? Okay. Everybody get their vote in? We're going to move forward. All right, so the biggest one was Asheville's fine cuisine, and we got 3% of the people who don't want to talk about it. Okay, so you basically get the point. Ask a question, you weigh in, we see the result. That's the basic sequence of things. Which of these best describes where you work? Coastal North Carolina, Piedmont, or mountain/western? Which best describes where you work? Okay. All right. Piedmont's in the house. Very nice. All right. Which of these is closer to describing your level of experience with audience polling devices? Clickers fear me, for I am their master. You've planned some meetings where they were used. You've seen them used many times. You've seen them used a few times. Well, what is this thing with numbers on it? Which is closest to describing your experience with this kind of technology? Okay. So, all right. So most 37% seen a few times, 29%, huh? What are you talking about? Very nice. Okay. So, so you guys need to know about it. Right? I'm in the right place. Okay, that is an experience question that I just did. Okay, that's a little, it's hidden by the taskbar, but that was an experience question. So what I'm also doing is showing you different types of questions as we go through. Okay, there are 15 million SPEIK devices used worldwide. What is the closest to the percentage that are used outside of K through 17 classrooms? So basically think of the world as they're used either in class from kindergarten to graduate school, or they're outside of that environment. Which is the closest percentage that is used outside of the classroom environment? The correct answer is 10%. So basically, the meetings market has not discovered these things. There's a lot of these things being used, but primarily in classrooms. So from the market standpoint of the people who make these devices, it's a growth opportunity, but of course they're also trying to do it in educational setting. But my point is, these could enhance meetings, and we're not using them to make meetings better. And that's what I'm trying to change. That was a fact question. Now, team competitions are a great way to add energy to a meeting, right? You were already on a team. The first question was worth 100 points. Let's see. The people from the Mountain Western are way ahead. They got it much more right than the other people. And I don't know what's up with the folks in Piedmont, who are the biggest group. All right. Okay, the next question is worth 150 points. That was worth 100 points. Okay, North Carolina's white folks people of color ratio by percentage is 64-36. You probably knew that. What's the closest for the ratio for the United States as a whole? Is it 70% white, 30% people of color, 60% white, 40% people of color, 50-50, or 40% white, 60% people of color? We know it is North Carolina. I figured y'all might have known that. What is it in the U.S.? The correct answer is number 2. So most of y'all got that correct. But almost half of y'all got that wrong. I would just point that out, right? Part of, let's see how that changes the, oh man, okay. So Piedmont got a little closer, very nice. Okay. So here's the point of that, right? So two things to remember. The competition can add energy to a meeting, right? It can be a slight break from the core of it, or also enhance the learning. That's number one. Number two, oftentimes asking fact questions will make people more open to new information, especially if most people get it wrong. They become more open to, their minds open, they become open to hearing things that they didn't know before, and that is an important dynamic in a meeting. Which of these comes closest to describing your political ideology? Left, A, left or mostly left, B, lean left a little more than right, C, lean right a little more than left, that should be to the left. So that's right, that's slightly right-leaning, my bad. D, right or mostly right, or E, something else, none of these fit.
But that's a new description there. You can probably find those that lean right, more right.
Well,
You might create something new.
well, that was intended to be lean right a little bit more than left. Which best describes you? Okay, so we're a little skewed to the left, but there's a fair amount of people who are not in that category. Okay, so there's diversity, ideological diversity in this room. Sometimes even establishing that in a meeting is actually useful, or establishing that that isn't the case. That's an opinion question we just did. Okay, so each type of question reveals an aspect of diversity. Demographics reveal an aspect of identity diversity. Experience, diversity in one's life journey. Fact, diversity in knowledge, and opinion, diversity in perspective. So part of what you can do in a meeting is make good choices about which of these you use and when in order to enhance the purpose of the meeting. Okay, think about all of the public meetings that happen in your jurisdiction. About what portion of them would you assess as very good? Vast majority, 75% or more. Most, 55 to 75%, about half, 40 to 55%, some but not most, 25 to 40%, a few, 10 to 25%, or very few, less than 10%. Public meetings. Ooh, y'all having some bad meetings. Okay. All right, so we can see that very few of us, only what, 23%, it just goes down to even about half of them are very good. So there are a lot of bad meetings. So part of, you're reinforcing my mission, which is to make the world better, make meetings better, one keypad question at a time. That's what I'm trying to do. Because I believe that by engaging people more, we can make our gatherings more dynamic, more interesting, and more productive. And I think that's to be all of our goal. Can you make them shorter? Very good. How often do you personally have full or partial responsibility for a meeting that has 20 or more people? 1 or 3 times per year or less, 1 or 3 times per quarter, 1 or 3 times per month, or once a week or more. How often do you personally have full or partial responsibility for a meeting that has 20 or more people? Okay, so what we see is that maybe a quarter of y'all are having meetings pretty frequently. Then another quarter are doing it a few times a quarter, and then the rest only a few times a year. So I still feel like I'm talking to the right people. So the value of these devices, it starts at about 10 people. It really dramatically goes up at about 15 people. Because basically the impact starts to happen when you can't visually quickly assess where people are if you do a up, down, or that kind of thing. When the benefit goes up when you can no longer do that because there's too many people. Okay, you can put the devices down for a while. So we know there's a lot of bad meetings, and we know that a fair amount of y'all do a fair amount of meetings. So I'm talking to the right people. So my intention is to create more early adopters of this technology, which I think is transformative and really pushes meetings forward. What are some benefits that you get from using SPEIK technology? You get greater engagement by meeting attendees. People are paying more attention. Presenters can't go on autopilot as easily, and the audience feels more connected to them. You ask a question, there's an answer. A presenter almost is compelled to say something about it, and perhaps to link it to what he or she is doing. That's a good thing. Hard data is generated and is instantly available. You get a clearer set of advice about the group's sense of problems or solutions. And you're also on some level promoting democratic values. Every voice counts equally. So you're doing that, the technology itself does that. Now I think it's a paradigm shift for meetings. I think that when we look back 500 years from now about the evolution of human cooperation, these devices, this technology will be important. The first move forward was the microphone. The fact that people, thousands or tens of thousands, millions of people can hear one person, not repeated like in that Occupy movement, but hear directly. It was a move forward in how human beings convene, how they gather, and how they cooperate. The projector, that's an old one, but y'all should remember that. Since pictures are worth 1,000 words, the projector, which allows somebody to give a visual depiction of their thoughts, they might be more powerful, that's a move forward, a paradigm shift in meetings. And I think that this technology is also that because every person can see on some level the thoughts of every person. And for a lot of time, we haven't been able to do that. So what do we use? We use politics, we use demagoguery, we use coercion, we use a lot of different approaches that are not necessarily in service of the best decision making because we don't know what people think. I think it's a new opportunity. I think it's a paradigm shift. And I think that people who care about civic engagement should get on board with it and recognize that. Ultimately, I think it's inevitable. I think it's just a matter of time. I think that it's just a question of whether or not this approach to meetings is going to take 30 years or going to take 60 years. My mission is to make it take as little time as possible. We want to go from an audience to participants. Participants where what people say influences what the presenter says. It influences what people talk about. It even influences the meeting agenda, depending on the meeting. Now, the use of polling is actually compatible with a trend from data collection. How many times have y'all seen that survey at CVS? Could you fill out this, please, and give us some customer feedback? How long is your receipt at CVS, right? If some of that is reminding you that they want your input because they will make better decisions if they get it. The Voice, Dancing with the Stars, there's all TV shows. There's a move toward hearing from people, but it is not affecting our meetings. Even though there's a technology that's cheap and accessible. I kind of don't understand that. And I'm really happy to talk to y'all because I figure that because y'all care about civic engagement and you care about citizen voice or resident voice, that you might be interested in figuring out how can we use the same processes of hearing from people and being adaptive and responsive that we use in other settings, how can we use that in our meetings?
When you say this is cheap, how much is this?
Okay. We'll talk about that at the end. How much is it? We'll talk about that at the end. I will address that question. So the meeting industry is behind other folks. I already mentioned some of that. Even social media is about hearing from people. But our meetings are not on board with that. So what happens? Our meetings are often pre-scripted theatrical experiences. How many town hall meetings have you gone to in which, let's think about how many people are watching and how many people do you hear from? Let's get the proportion of that. It's overwhelmingly people are watching, right? So, and that's just town hall meetings. If you think of a number of other types of meetings, a similar dynamic often happens. There's more, in a one-voice meeting, you're only hearing from one person at a time, there's limited time, you're not going to hear from everybody. We now have a means to hear from everybody and to let that influence what we're doing. Again, we're kind of shift from talk to hear from. There'll always be some talk to, but my belief is that this approach to meetings, it shifts the balance of how much talk to, how much hear from. And I think that's a good thing. Okay. Having the ability to ask the group a question and everybody know the answer makes anybody planning a meeting, let's call that person a meeting strategist, that's what I call myself. You have to ask the question, how could this meeting be improved by hearing from participants? This begs the question of what is this meeting for? Why are we meeting? Why are we doing the very expensive thing, looking at the time value of money, and everybody's time is valuable, why are we meeting? Having the technology and recognizing its advantages forces you to ask that question. And that's a good thing, because how many people have been in meetings that are a waste of time? A lot. Okay. Now, that's just at the level of the meeting. I think that there are some profound issues raised by this technology, and y'all are in a great position to think about that. Because the question is, what are the settings in which it makes sense to solicit community input? Well, getting input on issues related to my organization that it wants to hear leads to me getting input on issues it does not want to hear about. And who gets to decide that? You know, when I talked to Glenn on the phone, he said that we all like community input, but we got to make choices about how much we want. When do we want it, right? And that's a struggle that you folks have. And I think that that's the profound issue around having the capacity to hear from people. Those questions lurk in the background, and you folks are in a better position to really appreciate that than anybody because of the nature of your work. So it's a real dilemma, but I still think that the advantages of hearing from people in so many cases totally outweigh the risks of unleashing a technology that you sometimes maybe get pressured to use when the bosses might not like. I still think it's in our interest, our collective interest, that we use this more. Okay, that's Albert Einstein. He spent the last 30 years of his life trying to come up with the unified field theory. I'll put him up because I want to show you my general theory of meetings. It's not as profound as Einstein, but you might find it useful. Okay, basically I think that you can think about meetings or moments in meetings as having three basic modes, and they all are different. The technology helps them all differently, and it's important to think of those out as you're planning meetings. First type of meeting is a download session. Basically, I want them to hear me. Right? So this is a meeting where the presenter is trying to put ideas out. It could be facts, it could be concepts. I'm trying to get stuff in my head, from my head into your heads. Right? That's what the meeting is for, or that's what the moment in the meeting is for if you're in a download mode. Now, what does polling do? Polling can help you confirm how well the recipients are receiving information. That's why some educators use it and trainers use it. So examples, trainings, speeches, panels, even public briefings. If you're trying to educate folks, it is often useful to link some key facts to them engaging what they think is true. Kind of like what I just did. I bet y'all gonna remember 2 months from now what the ratio in the US is, because I engaged you around that. If I had just told you that, it might go in one ear and out the other, maybe. In this kind of mode, participants are treated like consumers or customers of this presentation. You want to serve your customers, that's a good thing, but that's what they are, right? They're customers of this presentation. The most common problems in these kind of meetings: presenters can't calibrate the information to fit participant experience, knowledge, or opinion, or they don't know if they've been heard. So how many times you've been to a download meeting and the person presenting just didn't really understand where the audience was coming from and gave almost the wrong talk? He emphasized the wrong things, he or she did. So part of the value is you have a mechanism for cutting that. So again, the questions that you might ask yourself if you're planning a meeting is, are there facts or concepts that are so important it makes sense to do a question on them? And are there any issues that it makes sense to survey the group on? But the point is to improve the quality of the delivery of that. This guy is named William Collins. He's one of the top climate scientists in the world. And I went to a meeting. I was invited to come to a meeting in Lake Tahoe where he was going to speak. And I was just going to do a crowd engagement thing. And I did it right before he spoke. He was way too busy for me to ask him any questions in advance. So I had to kind of figure out what he might talk about and ask questions that would work, that would have a high chance of working in the room. I had no contact with him whatsoever. When he gave the talk, he was like, one of my questions, for example, was, how many people in here believe that climate change it has human causes? And I think it was like 88%. It's Lake Tahoe, right? So, so 88%. he twice in his speech he said, "Oh, I'm so happy that you did that," because he came armed for bear, ready to fight, right, ready to make the case for this, and he's got an audience that already believes it, so he could shift his discussion to something more appropriate for people who already believe that. Who's that? Oh, that's good. I was expecting people to say Morgan Freeman, because that happened. That's Danny Glover. So one time I was doing a presentation in a hotel, and after it was done, I learned that Danny Glover was going to be using a nearby room to promote some health food product that he was doing, Noni juice, I think it was called. And I started talking to one of his handler people about whether or not I might create something to enhance his talk. This is the day of. And I told him how it worked. He said, "Yeah, you can do that." So I came up with a few questions, and the questions were things like, which of these aches and pains do you have? And these are people, in their 50s and 60s, so that wasn't hard to come up with that list, right? How often do you use health food products? Do you have friends that have these problems? It was a network marketing scheme or arrangement that he was promoting, as well as the juice. So it did this for it took me about a half hour to do it. It was done on the spot. This took about 6 minutes, about 6 questions before he came up. And of course, what he did, as a good performer, he responded to what he learned. So it turns out that many of those people, they came to this network marketing thing for a health product, but they don't use it themselves. So he basically said, well, y'all need to start using this if you want to promote it, right? Had it been the other way, he just said, well, how come you're not talking to your other people? So he was able to tailor his presentation to what we found. So again, that's part of the value of the technology in a download environment. Okay, mode 2, feedback session. That's when you want to hear from people. The primary purpose of this moment or this meeting is so that I can hear from you, right? Different purpose of the meeting, but I'm really interested in what you folks think. A focus group. We've all done focus groups, organizational self-assessments, community health assessments, where you ask people various health behaviors or their access to health resources, listening sessions by public officials, right? How many times you've been to a meeting and you get a whole sequence of people coming up to the mic and talking, and it's hard to assess where even those people are as a group, because there's too many, much less the people who didn't speak, right? So in a listening session, that might be very valuable. It also is a case where top management might want to get input from a variety of staff, right? To call together an all hands on deck meeting and run a few questions by them to get better input about the external environment, some internal dynamics, et cetera. In this kind of case, the consumers, the people in the meeting are either consumers or customers outside of the meeting. They're not just consuming that presentation, but you have a different kind of relationship with them, and you're trying to assess their experience as consumers or customers, or they you're turning them into advisors whose perspective that you want to hear. That's a very different thing than the first one, okay? You're a decision maker, you're gonna hear from people. I'm still making the decision, but I really do wanna hear from the group. Common sources of failure, these type of meetings, people are not willing to express their real opinion. Some voices dominate the feedback. Have we ever seen meetings like that where I want to get feedback and a couple of people get on the mic and talk a long time and on some level filibuster and you got to shut them down, and in the end of the meeting you have not heard from a lot of people. As I said, presenters are not clear on the proportion of feedback, positive, negative, or emphasizing different points. How does SPEIK help? Anonymity helps you get honest feedback. This is a great way of engaging the public in surveys, including folks with low literacy. There are people who couldn't do a survey online because they can't read, but they could be guided through something in a meeting because all you're doing is pressing 1 or 2. They might not even be able to read it, but if you read it for them, they can answer those questions. And you can make focus groups much larger and have them be more representative. One of the things that you can also do is to create more civility by showing people who's in the room and who's not in the room. So imagine, this is not a polling question. Sometimes you can ask a question about who's here, and then you can show the proportion who's actually supposed to be represented. So if you're in a city, the example here was a city that's mostly black and white, and then you find out that in this meeting we have more people who are not black and white than we normally do. And this could go vary in a lot of different ways. It is valuable often, especially when the topic is contentious, to show people who isn't in the room. Doesn't mean that you chastise anybody, but you can say, okay, well, it's clear that we're hearing a lot from people from this particular town, this particular political party, this particular position. We know that the community that we represent is bigger, so we will love hearing from you, but we also recognize the voices that are not fortunately here. That's a meeting that I did in New Orleans in 2006. The foundation community wanted to call together people in New Orleans to come up to sort out the competing priorities that the mayor, the city council, they all had different redevelopment plans, and they were competing. And you might know that New Orleans has a history of some corruption, so the foundation community was very concerned about those competing plans. At the first meeting that my group was not involved in, we did a question about who's at the meeting. 70% of the folks made over $100,000 a year. Why was that? Because the poor folk had to leave. The poor folk were in other places. So that confirmed what we knew, which for Community Congress 2, which had 2,500 people, 1,300 in New Orleans, and then hundreds in Baton Rouge, Atlanta, Dallas, and Houston, one meeting connected by satellite. We knew we had to do that because the poor folk left. And when we did the same question at that meeting, and we saw that 25% of the folks in the collective room were below the poverty line, a cheer went up because we're not used to having meetings like that. That was so you can know who's there and who's not there by this technology, and sometimes that's very important. This is my friend Christy Zamani. She uses these devices to do health assessments for youth, and she finds out things that have affected her advocacy of her youth organization. She found out, for example, in doing one of these, 60% of the folks, of the kids that she was dealing with had parents who only had middle school education. They had multiple Fs and bad behavior problems. 35% of them said they smoked weed every day. She couldn't believe that, but it was true, right? So again, part of the value is you can get information from people, get feedback from them about their own lives that may be useful in your planning. That's Detroit Public Library. Let's go by that quickly. Had a big meeting with all the staff, and we tried to sort out who was being served well and who was being served poorly. So part of what we could do with the technology is to quickly see, oh, there's agreement that we're serving adults with low literacy well, but the disagreement whether we're serving youth with low literacy well. So maybe we don't talk about the thing we already agree with, and we spend our collective time talking about the thing that we disagree about to sort out our different perspectives and to make better decisions as management. Third type of meeting, I want them to hear each other. Right? It's not about downloading or hearing back. I want us to talk collectively. Right? It's more of a communications or analysis session. Polling can help improve communication among participants. Most community meetings are kind of between 2 and 3. Part of what you have to think about is how does that interface with facilitation? But the technology can be very helpful as you try to guide a conversation because you can tee up issues in ways that are productive. So decision-making boards, neighborhood meetings convened by community organizers. If the community organizer convenes a meeting and it's really about what do we want to do, right? That hearing from the we is very important. Having the people see different perspectives in the room as we try to sit down and figure out our strategy is very important. Or group meetings with shared decision making. In this model, the participants are partners. So remember, they've gone from customers of the meeting to customers of the group to partners with the group. That's the continuum there that is important to think about if you're trying to make good choices about how do we hear from people in a way that advances the cause of the meeting. Most common sources of failure: people don't want to speak up, people get entrenched in their own position, and they don't want to work collaboratively. Quick story about how it can change people's attitudes. Meeting about redevelopment in Richmond, Virginia. Did a polling question on income. 25% of the people in the room made over $100,000. This woman stopped us after a little while and said, I have to revisit my own thinking. I'm in the category of making less than $25,000, and I think of you rich people as uncaring. And for you to be here and to help with this process makes me go, who can I collaborate with? What's going on with me that I thought that all y'all rich folks don't care about anybody? So seeing the distribution of perspectives, of thoughts in a room can make people revisit, why do I think like I think? And that attitude is so important for civility. Ground zero, there was a meeting for 4,500 people in New York to give feedback on the redevelopment plans. And it was important on recruitment to get survivors and business owners and the whole diversity of New York. You could test for that. In the end, the people decided we don't like any of the plans on the table. And the Lower Manhattan Redevelopment Agency had to go back to the drawing board, having heard from people so strongly that we don't like your plan. So on some level, the people are partners there, and decision makers are responding to that. This is a meeting that I did only recently in Ohio. With all the tumult happening around police community relations, one of the things that I was invited in to do was to convene a discussion about that. These are a bunch of pastors, Methodist pastors. So in addition to being a stakeholder engagement specialist around technology and other means, I'm also do a lot of work on race relations. That's why my tag said the race doctor. I'm now switching my branding to the dialogue guy. I'm not sure which is better, but we'll see. But the point is, conversations about race is something I know something about. And so we were asked to come in and convene a conversation. 144 pastors. We had 4 meetings. And in the end, the group made some decisions about what they wanted to focus on. I wasn't at the last meeting because I was on a cruise with my wife. But I know that they made some decisions about how to move forward. The next meeting was actually yesterday. So the point I'm making is that when people are partners, you use the technology differently because you're trying to have them engage with each other and advance their thinking about what they might do to confront their situation. Core problems in that type of meeting, or the core problems in general, is that a lot of times people who plan meetings are not clear about what type of meeting they're having. So for example, if you are having a download meeting and people expect coming to get feedback, or give feedback, they're going to be frustrated. If you organize a feedback meeting where they think they're partners and they're just advisors, they're going to be frustrated. So part of what is important is to be clear about what your meeting is, to match the process that you're using to what the meeting actually is, and to be transparent about that. And again, the technology helps you focus on what mode am I in and what is the real value of us gathering. And you're forced to think about that in a certain way by having the capacity to positively leverage the group brain. How often, let's have a little dialogue. How often do you have to defend decisions that you really don't like? So now I'm asking, pick up your clickers, I'm asking y'all that question. Anywhere from very infrequently to occasionally, fairly often for, or very often 5. How often do you feel like you have to do that? It's not a trick question, and it's anonymous. You can say your real feeling. That's kind of what I'm talking about. I don't know what you did. Your boss ain't gonna know what you did. Occasionally. All right. That's interesting. Okay. And How much is your job satisfaction related to how often you have to defend decisions you don't like? Not related at all, related a little. I mean, and many of you have multiple jobs in this field. So how much is your job satisfaction related to that? Not related at all, related a little, related some, related a lot. It's a primary factor. Okay, interesting. Okay. So let me ask, the people who said it's related a lot or it's related some, does anybody feel free enough to say why that is, to say something about that? Uh-huh.
You just feel as personal integrity at, at a certain point you're going to start to feel the life being sucked out of you if you're always defending stuff that you think is a bunch of BS.
Okay. Well, that's how you, no, that's how you feel, right? The point is that that's how you feel. Anybody else that in the two rightmost categories on there?
I agree. I think it's an integrity, maybe even sometimes a morality issue.
Well, morality, what do you mean?
Well, if the decision isn't something that you believe fully in, it's hard to go out there and sell it. And that's what we do every day, sell. Manager likes to say, you're spinning it. Okay, we're spinning it, whatever.
But sometimes you feel that it's, the decision is so,
Genuine.
uh-huh. Okay. Any other comments from that side of the voting? So it's interesting that, I mean, certainly, what is it, about half of y'all, it's either related to some or related a lot. Okay, let me ask the other way. How about people who said it's not related at all? Say more about that.
Sometimes it's par for the course. You take on these positions knowing what all is entailed. So it's really, if you look at the bigger picture, you enjoy the job itself. You enjoy the job as a whole. There are always going to be aspects of any job that you don't like. So I think that maybe this group is not having as many options or opportunities rather to have to defend the things that they don't agree with or that they're not.
Oh, interesting. So maybe I see what you're saying, just to make sure I understand, maybe the people who are in the 28%, they somehow have chosen jobs where they don't have to do that.
Well, not
Maybe.
as often.
Not as often.
Not as often. Maybe you're not in the situation as often as some of the other folks on the other side of the pole where you feel like you're having to set aside yourself for the best of the job.
What do other people think might account for the difference in the voting? Mm-hmm.
I think maybe you're looking at two different classifications of what decisions are being made. Perhaps the people who selected 4 or 5 are looking at decisions with a lot of weight to them, and the people who selected 1, 2, and 3 maybe are thinking about their jobs in general and not necessarily those ethical conflicts, but rather, minor decisions that are made on a daily basis.
Okay, so maybe looking at different types of decisions. I got you. Any other comments about what might account for
Maybe a person's sort of natural tendency to be able to separate what they're doing, being told to do versus what they feel they should do. So if those two things you can keep separated, which is hard.
So the compartmentalization type of a thing, yeah. It's difficult. It's difficult. I cannot imagine being in y'all's position a lot of the times. If I look at some decisions that have to be made and your job is to put the best face on it, no matter whether you believe in it or not, right? And I gotta imagine that that's difficult sometimes. I know if I did your job, I'd be in the it's directly related, right? And that's tough too, because then you gotta find a situation in which you agree with what's happening, and public officials are subject to changing. We live in a democracy. So part of what we can notice is there an impact of us talking as a group on seeing the group, seeing the results? To what extent does seeing that contribute to us having a better conversation? That's the thing to think about. Okay. So I'm not sure this will show anything, but one of the things you can do with the technology is to see if there's any correlation between different questions. So this tries to correlate people's region. Let me step out of it and move that. People's, where they're from and how they felt about that question. But here's the point. The point is, for example, when I did that race relations meeting in Ohio and asked the question, how many times have you seen behavior by police officers that you thought was problematic? We'd earlier asked the race question. It was very obvious that the people of color reported seeing that more. That itself is useful for people to see. We can figure out what that means. We can argue about that, but seeing that itself has a value for the group. Now we're getting close to the end, and I want to report back to you the mining exercise that we did earlier. So I'm going to go through these. But I guess I just want to say briefly, my feeling that almost any gathering can be improved with the smart use of SPEIK technology. A conference, I've done things where you just open up a conference by just, instead of a plenary speaker, let's all know find out who's here. And you create a little experience for people where they feel connected to other people. They don't know who else is the gardener or who else has grandparents who are still alive or whatever that is, but people feel more connected. So it can help you with a conference setting. It can help you in community meetings and workshops. Again, I mentioned the library example. I think the core thing is that in a workshop setting or a dialogue, you can lean into the diversity better because you see it. It helps you manage conversation around it better, and that's a very good thing. Okay, last thing we want to do, something called the 3E question scrub. So imagine that a group is, they have a set of actions that are possible, they've identified, and they want to figure out what to do. I found this often useful to ask them 3 questions. What action, if done well, would have the most impact on your situation? What action would it be easiest to do well? And what are you personally most interested in working on? So why don't we lean up toward that? Here's what you said you'd like support on as individuals from this organization: managing the many competing priorities, getting more resources for my department, reaching underserved populations, analytics, measuring effectiveness, interdepartmental communications, social media issues, using it, managing, establishing policies, staying informed on best practice. Here's my question. Which of these would you most like NC3C to give you support on? They're all important. Which would you most like to see support on from the organization? Managing many competing priorities, getting more resources for your department, reaching underserved populations, analytics, measuring effectiveness. I will give this to Glenn, but you can see that one issue rises above others. Hold on, a little glitch there. Your suggestions for the organization: improve the prestige of communication departments, stay engaged between conferences, increase exposure to non-participants who are non-members now, continuing education on good practices as they change, a better online presence. We're going to ask you 3 questions. Which of these would be most effective in enhancing growth? If an effort was constructed to do these and it was done well, which of these would have the most impact on growing the organization? Okay? So it's kind of obviously a tie between staying engaged in conferences and increasing exposure to non-participants, but the biggest one is continuing education. Okay, that's what will have the most impact. Which would be the easiest to make progress on? Same list. Better online presence would be easiest one. A lot easier to do that, right? Okay. What's that? Last question. Which would you personally be most interested in helping with? And you can choose two. Same list. Interesting how those things don't converge, right? Most interested in staying engaged between conferences. Okay. So again, I don't know what the answer is to all those, but I think that the people who run this organization will want to look at that and think through, what does it make sense to do? Where do we get an easy victory? Because it combines, we can do it, it's effective, it's not super hard, and we have people who want to help make it happen. My book is coming out this next month, Read the Room for Real, How Simple Technology Creates Better Meetings. I have the preview edition here. I'm not selling it, but just to show you it is a real book. And the truth is that even on my ride up here, I had some new revelations about the book. My copy editor will hate me. And I think it comes largely from hearing Glenn talk about who you folks are and the dilemmas that you face around public engagement and the tension between talk to and hear from. I really appreciate your time. If you, most of you have a card in the back of I'll give you a card if you don't have it in the back of the keypad. I am interested in, I work around the country, but not enough in my new home state. So I'm interested, one of the reasons I'm excited about coming here is because not only you folks care about civic engagement. That's what I focus on. And so I can do anywhere from help groups do it to just come talk about it. That would still be interactive. If any of you guys enjoyed this presentation, found it intriguing, there'll be a little time to speak in front of the camera. We ask a couple of questions, because again, I'm trying to, I'm on a mission to improve how we do that. And if you are intrigued by this and enjoyed this talk, I'm also on a mission to just give more talks. So if you like my talk, we could do a short testimonial in front of the camera, that would really help me. I want to thank you so much for your time. Oh, she wants to know what it costs. She wants to know what it costs. Okay, so just to be clear, I use this particular companies. They are the market leader, but I'm not, I'm no shill for them. Turning Technologies, these devices cost about $40 a piece, and the receiver costs about $600. So a critical thing that you can do is to share them. I talked to some people in Seattle, and one department bought them. This woman got money from different departments, and then they loan them out to different departments. So this is not super expensive, and this isn't the only way to do it. So I really want to encourage y'all to think creatively about how we improve the number of meetings that are good. Thanks so much.
Thank you